The war against Ukraine has brought US-Russian relations to their lowest point in modern history. Russia is demonstrating that it has no regard for human rights, nations' sovereignty and territorial integrity, or nations' right to determine their own future. Russian President Vladimir Putin clearly has imperialist ambitions. Ukraine did not provoke the war, and Putin likely would prefer to convert Ukraine into Russian territory once again. For starters, the transatlantic community needs to checkmate Putin's two most important weapons, his military and Russia's use of energy to blackmail, coerce, and profit. Strengthening for the fight to hold the Russian Federation accountable for its war crimes in Ukraine, support Ukraine, and strengthen the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. The United States has taken several actions. The following list is not exhaustive of all U.S. actions taken since February 24, the start of the war, however. Washington has imposed multiple rounds of sanctions on Moscow, sending the Russian economy south. And imposed sanctions on Russia's VTB Bank and 4 other financial institutions, VEB, the Russian Direct Investment Fund, the Nord Stream 2 pipeline and its chief executive officer, several defense-related entities, Vladimir Putin, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, several Kremlin-connected oligarchs, and more. It also cut selected Russian banks from the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, SWIFT, messaging system to ensure that these banks are disconnected from the international financial system and harm their ability to operate globally. The United States also sent approximately 14,000 troops to Germany, Poland, and Romania to reinforce NATO's eastern flank, in case the war encroaches onto NATO territory. It is also difficult for U.S. citizens to visit Russia due to a Level 4 travel advisory imposed by the U.S. State Department, and likewise for Russians to visit the United States due to most visa services being halted. 3 U.S. citizens, Paul Whelan, Trevor Reed, and Brittany Griner, currently are imprisoned in Russia. Whelan and Reed, 2 former U.S. Marines, most likely are imprisoned on fabricated charges, and Griner, a Women's National Basketball Association, WNBA, star, is imprisoned allegedly for transporting hashish oil in her luggage at the Moscow airport. The U.S. State Department is working towards all 3 of their releases. Connected to the war in Ukraine, Russia has created a new law that criminalizes any reporting that contradicts the Russian government's version of events, which has shut down, whether temporarily or permanently, American media outlets in Russia such as Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and the New York Times. Because of Russia's war in Ukraine, US-Russian relations will suffer tremendously for the foreseeable future. NATO responses Russia's second invasion of Ukraine has proven, at least initially, a severe shock to Europe. For the time being, it's put to bed questions around the usefulness of NATO and supercharged the obvious need for the alliance's upcoming strategic concept to place a spotlight on collective defense as the core task of the alliance for the foreseeable future. Russia's actions have laid bare the reality that military capabilities remain crucial for securing freedom, especially in the era of great power competition. The questions for NATO moving forward are threefold. How does the alliance respond to the shifted geopolitical map of Europe in terms of operational planning? Finally, how can NATO continue to aid Ukraine in defending its sovereignty against a Russian regime bent on extinguishing their existence? In addition to scrambling the political map of Europe, Russia's war against Ukraine has dramatically altered the physical landscape of the European theater. It's too early to determine the outcome of the conflict, however, even if we assume Russian forces are pushed out of Ukraine, Russia's de facto absorption of Belarus necessitates NATO update its operational planning. Alliance members should also be aware of ways in which Russia will utilize the war in Ukraine to impose additional economic pressures against Black Sea nations. Russia's 2014 invasion of Ukraine caused a shift in threat perceptions amongst many NATO members, particularly those closest to Russia. This changing threat assessment, alongside perhaps in part, the stridency of US calls for more defense spending, led to real increases. As NATO's Secretary General's annual report noted, 2020 marked the 6th consecutive year of growth in defense spending by European allies and Canada, with an increase in real terms of 3.9% from 2019 to 2020. Moreover, 11 allies met the guideline of spending 2% of their gross domestic product on defense, up from just 3 allies in 2014. Putin's actions have supercharged this trend, leading some nations such as Germany and Denmark, for instance, to announce plans to spend 2% of GDP. Other nations, such as Estonia and Romania, which spend 2%, to increase defense budgets even further. At March's extraordinary NATO summit in Brussels, Secretary General Stoltenberg announced that NATO allies who have not attained 2% will bring plans to raise spending to that level to the next NATO summit taking place in Madrid in June. The alliance must move beyond mere, tripwire, force deployments to large, permanently deployed capabilities in eastern member states to adequately deter Putin from contemplating future action against a NATO member. Finally, NATO has a role to play in organizing deliveries of aid and weaponry to Ukraine. Since the war began, NATO member states have sent weapons and humanitarian aid to Ukraine. This aid has been donated on a bilateral basis between individual nations in Ukraine. NATO can and should take a leading role in organizing aid from its member states to Ukraine, which should over time better maximize the impact on Western aid on the ground in Ukraine. Fighting for abundant, affordable, reliable energy. Europe is facing an energy crisis. In the European context, Russia most benefits from the current energy crisis. Never one to pass up an opportunity to turn a geopolitical crisis into his advantage, President Putin has used the energy shortage in Europe to give Russia the upper hand. Europe already depends on Russian natural gas for 40% of its needs. In total, almost 200 billion cubic meters of natural gas are now imported from the country annually due to declining European production and rising demand. As a vestige of the Cold War, most infrastructure in the region runs east to west, stymieing greater regional interconnectedness. Developing north-south interconnections and pipelines will boost Europe's energy security. Russia has a track record of using energy as a tool of aggression. As Nord Stream 2 gets closer to being fully operational and as winter approaches, do not expect Russia to help Europeans solve their energy crisis. Each barrel of oil and cubic meter of gas that Europe can buy elsewhere other than Russia will make it more secure. Finally, the US should boost LNG exports to Europe. American energy companies continue to be a major reliable and cost-competitive supplier of natural gas to European markets. Upon Congress's lifting of a ban on US export of natural gas and oil in 2015, US export capacity has grown from negligible amounts to being among the top 3 exporting countries in the world and meeting roughly 19% of global demand. The US will have the largest LNG export capacity in the world by the end of 2022 with the completion of the Sabine Pass and Calcasieu Pass facilities in Louisiana and upgrades to increase production capacity at several existing facilities, for a total of 13.9 billion cubic feet per day, compared to 11.6 in 2021. An 8th LNG export facility in Texas is expected to come online by 2024, and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has approved several other projects which are not yet under construction. In October 2021, LNG exporters in the US were operating beyond capacity, and the EIA expects US exports to be 16% more than last year in response to new capacity and high demand for natural gas in Europe and Asia. Each barrel of oil and cubic meter of gas that Europe can buy elsewhere other than Russia will make it more secure. While these proposals alone are not enough to completely decouple Europe from its energy dependency on Russia, they are a good start.
Time for choosing. After the war against Ukraine, Putin will be faced with the challenge of rebuilding his military and the Russian economy. In these months, or perhaps years, the Kremlin will be limited in its capacity to threaten the transatlantic community. That is exactly when the West needs to step boldly forward with serious defense and energy policy to ensure future Putin threat can be stiff.